Well, thank you so much, Leanne. A very important subject. There's the protection and safety of whistleblowers. And this, of course, was again raised at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry. And the chairperson, Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo, last week asked legal teams of witnesses to personally look into this matter. And I'm joined this morning here by Cherese Thakur, who is with the Helen Suzman Foundation, a researcher at that organization, talking about this matter. So before we went to news, you spoke about what other countries are doing and comparing that to what happens in South Africa, Ghana in particular, where you said they would then immediately have police protection for whistleblowers. That's not the case in South Africa, though. How does our law ensue in this regard?
So I think a whistleblower in the South African context, as I said, they're not necessarily protected. The one piece of legislation that could assist them is the Witness Protection Act. So the Witness Protection Act does actually apply to people who are testifying in proceedings. So for that purpose, for instance, the Zondo Commission would count as such as proceedings. It could also include, for instance, court proceedings. But as I said, not every whistleblower is somebody who testifies. So that is something, that is now a process that you have to go through to obtain protection as a witness in that regard. Then there's also the Protection from Harassment Act, which is basically where you would go and apply for a protection order on the basis that you suspect that somebody is stalking or harassing or threatening harm to you. That's also a process that you'd have to follow. And I think the thing that you have to think about is these pieces of legislation do exist, but what is their efficacy? To what extent can these, to what extent does a protection order actually protect you? I think the police resources are very strained. They're dealing with crimes that are being committed all the time, and then they have to now, watch and look after a whistleblower. I don't know the level to which that is a priority, and I think that's the concerning thing. When you talk to whistleblowers, and there are organizations that are out there to support them, they talk about the isolation that they feel. So it's not only the threat that they feel to their lives and to their family, they feel socially isolated. They could be sued, so there might be financial risks. There's just a long list of disincentives to disclose.
And speaking to the role of the police, witnesses have on more than one occasion spoken out about the police and their failure to assist in this predicament. What does this say about our policing system? I was also talking about a specific case of Thabiso Zulu in the Sindiso Makaka case. So the public protector in this instance comes out, recommends that he be afforded protection along with another whistleblower in this particular case. They are still waiting for that protection. This after the police, intelligence, they've all done the due assessments and found that indeed there needs to be protection for these guys. But they are now heading to court and still they don't have protection.
It's incredible, but I think that's the unfortunate situation that whistleblowers in South Africa find themselves in. So I think there's just not that institutional support. And in that sense, how can you feel comfortable coming forward? I definitely feel that they're in a very difficult predicament.
So what do you believe should be the Deputy Chief Justice's next move? So he's spoken to the legal teams to look into this matter, but apart from asking the legal representatives to make work of this, what should happen?
So as the Commission, the Deputy Chief Justice doesn't have, powers in that sense. I think this really falls to the responsible authorities in the police and, for instance, with the investigation and prosecution of Mr. Ngwenya's killers, to send a message that this is not tolerated and that we will protect whistleblowers and this conduct will not be ignored. I think that is where there's a lack. And I think even with the Public Protector and the Zondo Commission, they have powers to make recommendations. But what we need to see is action from the authorities. I think that's what's lacking.
But how do we propel the relevant authorities to actually do what they are supposed to do?
I think there needs to be just public pressure. So I think another aspect of that whistleblowers face in South Africa, where I mentioned the social isolation, they're not always regarded with, they're not treated as heroes in their communities. Sometimes they're treated as snitches and sellouts, and so they don't actually get that support. So I think the first thing that we actually need to do, and they're not believed all the time, and sometimes the kind of personality that is the person who would come out and blow the whistle is not necessarily the most agreeable person in the organization. So I think the first thing we need to do is to support them, and then we need to call for changes to the legislation. So the Transparency International best practice recommended that legislation be reviewed every 5 years. So we last amended the Protected Disclosures Act in 2017, but we mustn't stop there. And although that amendment did increase protections, we mustn't stop there. We must see how we can push the bar further, look at what other countries are doing to protect their whistleblowers, and not be complacent.
Well, Cherese, thanks so much for speaking to us this morning. And this, of course, about whistleblowers and their protection. Cherese Thakur is a legal researcher at the Helen Suzman Foundation, and again calling for more active citizenry on the part of you and I and every other South African to make sure that whistleblowers in this morning's instance are protected. Let's take a break.